Welcome to the 11th Commandment. I'm Brian Stevens here with Spook. How you doing today, brother?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Awesome,
Sun
man.
shining today.
Love it, love it. Well, hey, we got a awesome guest today that I'm really excited about introducing. His name is Ben Severance, and Ben, before he jumps into introducing himself, his dad very well. I've worked with his dad, Mike, and just a good human being. We did some turkey hunting this past spring. We had him down on the ranch, and he killed his first Osceola, which it was just so much fun. He was here last year, and we struck out, and I put him right in the pocket this year, Spook, and he got it done, and it was awesome. So, Ben, you're a huge hunter. You played sports. You have, a huge background in hunting and fishing with your dad. So just first off, tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and the type of hunting you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Middle Tennessee. Hunting my dad, we had a couple places in East Tennessee. One of the places he actually grew up hunting. So he started deer hunting when he was 18, and we hunted that place a lot. We still lease it out. He's been hunting it for 30 years and been hunting with the same guys. So it was cool to kind of see that, and we'd go there on the weekends and hang out with all his buddies and just kind of have that, the deer camp camaraderie that everybody talks about.
Love it.
And then we had a couple places in Middle Tennessee that were local that we hunted, just some smaller tracks. But I fell in love with it from the first time I went, and that was deer hunting. I just really, really loved it. I'd go sit in the cold and sleep in the bottom of the blind when I was, young. I was 8 years old when I killed my first deer, or my first buck. And just kind of as it progressed, I started getting more and more into like why deer do what they do. And I kind of wanted to figure out, because we were just kind of, hunting the same stands consistently, like go sitting with the 3 stands, and you hunted this one majority of the time. And if you got a wild hair, you go sit in this one, and kind of started thinking outside the box early high school of how to, like maybe these deer are moving different places on these chunks of property, and kind of enjoyed breaking down that and doing the scouting side of things. It was also when I got into archery hunting. I'd strictly, gun hunted before that, had a crossbow. Yep. Then I got into archery hunting and killed my first deer with a bow, and was like that. This is it. I was like, that's all I needed there for that. And I played baseball growing up, so I didn't get to turkey hunt a whole lot, just because weekends were full of ball. And then as I got into college and had more free time, I really fell in love with turkey hunting. So it's kind of the buffer between duck and deer season, and just kind of hunt all of it and hunt it all as hard as I can.
Love it. So right now, the little bit of talking, we've done and with your dad is that you really migrated to obviously hunting the farm that you guys grew up on, but you're doing a lot of public land hunting, which can be tough. And so I want you to talk a little bit about, how you approach public land, the good, the bad, the ugly, some of the challenges, some of the successes, and then, obviously, Spooks, we've all hunted public land, but private land. And then we can get into maybe some different scenarios and talk about strategies on public land first. And then we'll transition into some of your private land management and some tips and strategies there.
Yeah, I think the first time I hunted public was my senior year of high school, and that was the deer right behind me. We got drawn for a quota hunt. It was October, but the quota hunt, so it was rifle hunt. And I just kind of never been on the property before, and this is my way of breaking down public land. Really hasn't changed much. I just kind of looked at a map on Onyx and e-scouted and found a general area I wanted to hunt, just based on the topography, and there was a creek running through it. And I was like, I'd like to stay in this area. Went in there, found some good sign. First day and a half sitting that place, didn't really have a whole lot of action. Had a little 4-pointer and a couple does come by, but there was fresh sign in there that was obviously made by a big buck, and turned out that was that deer right there. And then that was an interesting experience for my dad, because he had never hunted public before, and he had a guy that shot a deer like 150 yards from him over the ridge. So always dealing with pressure on public definitely makes it a little bit different than hunting private. And I think just how you manage the pressure is a big thing. Like I always try to find spots that walk further than most people would be willing to. But also on the contrary to that, there's a lot of deer that get walked by people. They're close to parking lots or right on a field edge that people miss. I feel like I think some of the success on public is just being out there and really putting in time to like a specific area. Obviously a few hundred acres that, if you've seen a good buck there, found good sign from the previous year, and just really hammering down that zone and learning how the deer move through that area. Because if you get in a place that's 12,000 acres, it can be overwhelming to be like, oh, I got all this land I have to break down, and they can just kind of send you on a wild goose chase.
Yeah. So, Spook, let me ask you. I mean, I know back in the day you did a lot of public land, and so you didn't have quite the technology that we have today. What were some of the things that? Because I love what you're saying, Ben, as far as just looking for creek sign topography. But what were some of the things you looked for back in the day on the public land side? Again, when you didn't have maybe Onyx or other technology.
Yeah, I've always been one of those that wants to get as far away from the road as possible. So I put my stand on my back if I didn't really feel like I had anything that I really liked, and I just start walking. And especially in the fall, I would find usually a topographical place that I like where points ran off together or saddle. And then usually you'll find some good rubs, kind of like what you were talking about. You'll find some good sign. If there's white oak acorns falling, you find a stand of white oaks on the side of a north facing hillside, and there'll be a couple of trails. You find some rubs, and I always like that. Sometimes I'll try to anticipate, and this was a lot of time what my summer scouting would be. I would, especially if I had hunted an area before and I would kind of see what the other hunters were doing and get a feel for where I thought the deer were escaping to or whatever. And so then I would also try to sometimes just almost ignore deer sign and feed sign and stuff and just try to hunt a funnel somewhere, maybe a half a mile back off the 3/4 of a mile back, where I felt like the deer were going to funnel through, just basically avoiding the other hunters. And then a lot of times what I'd also try to do would be find an alternative route into a spot to come in from, say, the back side, or maybe make a big fish hook to come into a spot so that I could get in there and get set up before the other guys started coming in. Most of the time when I would be headed to get in a tree, everybody else would be sitting at the coffee shop or at the tent drinking coffee and smoking and eating bacon and eggs. And so I'd try to get in there and get set up. And then hopefully when they started coming in at daylight, by the time the deer kind of got pushed back to where I was at, and did pretty good on that too. Really one of the first bigger bucks I ever killed, I was 14 years old. It was rifle season on public hunting. And I did that. I got in a place, there was actually the head of 3 hollows that headed up, and it was real steep on the sides. So these deer would come around the sides of those hills, and I had a stand right up on top. And so those deer would get pushed through there. And there was a 8-point, I never forget. I was so excited. I saw his rack coming, and he was laying it down. And I was shooting a 300 Magnum at 14 years old.
Good Lord.
And he came by me at about 30 yards, and I mean boot scooting, son. He was kicking it. And I just picked a spot out in front of me. And when I always shot with both eyes open. And when I anticipated him coming in the scope, I just pulled the trigger, and I'm telling you, he rolled like a bowling ball. It was one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me in my life. He actually hit him in the backbone, and he pulled himself down in the biggest canyon in Middle Tennessee, and I had to walk down there and shoot him again, and I was so excited, couldn't wait for my dad to get there, and I had to go back and find him, and we had to. It was the hillside was so steep that when we were dragging, we'd have to hook his legs around a little sapling to keep him from sliding back down. First time we turned loose of him, he slid back down to the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I was so excited, and
I
I'll
guess
never.
so, brother.
And taking that deer into there's nothing more awesome in deer hunting than taking a deer to the check-in station with about 30 old men sitting around in orange smoking, telling stories and lies, and here you are, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid bringing in the biggest buck of the day. Priceless. And my dad, you would have thought I just threw a touchdown for the New England Patriots to win the Super Bowl. He was so excited. It was just awesome. He just relished in it. And we got back in the truck to leave, and he just left the tailgate down. I mean, dude, this is back in the days when you killed a big one. You rode that sucker down. He rode him around till the hide started slipping, and it was priceless. You know, we drove off, and those guys were standing there, and you could just see them smoking and cussing and shaking their head. You know, and
I love it.
That's what it's all about right there.
It was epic. You know, that's one of those old. That was in the 1970s. I mean, that was a story that, you know, we get caught up with talking about the big ones. And in the big scheme of life today, I wouldn't even shoot that deer today. You know, I mean, he was like a 130, you know, 3-year-old. But to me, it was he was a 220, and
absolutely,
it was just epic. And so, you know, I tell you, I did really good. I killed a deer there every year on Cheatham Wildlife Management Area, and we hunted land between the lakes. And I'd kill one every year at LBL. I used to juvenile hunt on LBL. And then when I was in 1985, which is when me and Marty got married, and that's why I can remember it, I did the same thing. I just put my stand on my back. It was November 1st. It was raining. And I took my dad to a spot that I'd hunted in juvenile season. And he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm just going to walk around until I find something I like." So I found this saddle, and there was 2 points coming off to it, and there was a bunch of cedar trees on that saddle. There was 4 or 5 big rubs in there and 2 or 3 scrapes. It had been rained on, but you could tell he had been there within the last week. And there was on one of those points, there was about 8 or 10 nice white oaks, and there was fresh tracks and feed sign where they had been in there that day. And the reason I could tell is it's raining, because if it hadn't been fresh, I couldn't. And so I just climbed a tree right there. I literally didn't sit there 45 minutes. I looked, and here come the prettiest white rack 6x6, just a gorgeous deer, and
awesome.
Walked right. I shot him at like 6 yards, right where his neck. He was quartering to me coming down the hill, so I shot him right where his neck met his shoulder, and it come out the behind. And he made a little hook, and I was worried about tracking, because I mean it was raining pretty good. He fell 10 yards from the tree. I threw my bow out of the tree. It's a wonder I didn't jump out of the tree. I couldn't wait. There again, couldn't wait to go get my dad, come back and go to the check-in station. Same type thing. It was just, everybody was just shaking their head, because November 1st was always a big day at LBL back in those days. I don't know about now, because bow season back then used to close on Halloween Day, which was my birthday. So we would hunt Halloween, and then according to what day the first fell on, we would take off work usually at mid morning, and drive to LBL and hunt that evening, and hunt for 3 or 4 days, and then come back home. So bow season had closed on the outside back then, and LBL was, so a lot of people did that. So there was a lot of people influx into LBL during that time frame and that first few days. And plus you're in pre-rut at that time, so you're seeing some pretty good sign. And I felt like it was common sense hunting, back then. But also I stayed with that mentality that just to get back as far as I thought I needed to get away from other people. That was generally my strategy. And then just finding what the best sign I could find. And another thing I would do, so at Cheatham, bow season was earlier, most of the time in October. And so a lot of times, I love the years when we didn't have many white oaks, but even if we did, chestnut oaks fell before the white oaks would start falling.
Yep.
So you had about a week there, a week or so, you could hunt chestnut oak acorns before they transitioned over to white oaks. So I would find some stands of chestnut oaks in places, and I would hunt the chestnut oaks. That was always extremely productive. And then a lot of times what would happen, and this happens all the time when you're hunting acorns, and you probably know this, but you can be sitting at a tree where there's a lot of sign under it, and you think, well, they're eating here, but then you get up in the stand, and for that morning or that evening or whatever, you're seeing them come into another tree. Well, what's happened is that tree started dropping fresher acorns, or for whatever reason they like them better. So I've actually sat in a stand in the morning for an hour and see 3 or 4 deer go to a tree and climb down, unhook my stand, run over there 100 yards, put my stand on the tree, and climb right back up there and kill a deer within another hour. So just being creative enough to allow yourself to be flexible and see what's going on, and then move accordingly.
Yep.
And then if it's places that you can hunt a lot and you learn about, the more you learn about an area, regardless of whether it's public, private, or whatever it is, the more knowledgeable you'll become about the places you need to be. It's always hardest the first time you go, and that's always the hardest time. But
So-
I hunted Oak Ridge. Just one quick thing, I hunted Oak Ridge, being the first year it ever opened, and it was phenomenal. There was a lot of big bucks there because it'd been closed so long. And I did the same thing. So we had a scout day. So you had one scout day, and we went like 2 weeks earlier on a scout day, and I just found a spot and I walked until I basically came to the water. There's some lakes and stuff there. Mm-hmm. And I found a pinch point where there was the land came around, there was an inlet, and these deer were coming around that inlet. And I found some rubs and scrapes and big oak trees. And so that's where I got it. And I killed a really big buck on that hunt. So a lot of it's just common sense and just taking advantage of what the sign and the terrain tells you. Now with today's technology and OnX and maps that you can look up on your Google Earth and all those things, you got a lot more to work with. And so you just study that and figure it out and start from there.
And speaking of that technology, so 2 questions, Ben. A lot of great pearls there from Spook. And so how do you take some of that? And one, do you carry a climber on your back when you go back there? Do you hunt from the ground? And then 2, how are you using technology today to help you kind of manage some of those scenarios and the things that, you talked about earlier, as far as human pressure and finding, sweet spots and all of that?
Yeah. So I have a saddle. I got a saddle,
okay,
I guess, end of the season a couple years ago. And I love it. Even on our private, I haven't sat in a tree stand since I got it. I really, really enjoy hunting out of the saddle. It's easy. It's light. I can shoot. Like deer I shot last year, I would have never been able to kill out of a lock on. Okay. Really, from like a technology standpoint, it's just like finding a general area for me, at least. And then I typically go do the same thing. Like my first day into a spot, I'm hoofing it. If I get in a set and I'm like, I don't like this set. I saw a deer walking on that ridge. I'll get down. I'll go move, and being able to be mobile is a huge part of how I hunt. I've had a ridge picked out and ended up 2 ridges over from where I originally hung up that morning. And it's weird when my first introduction to really hunting public was West Tennessee, like Obion River Bottom, which is
a little bit different,
flat. And I'd never hunted anything that was completely flat, that was a big change for me. And just because the deer, there's nothing there's nothing really to restrict their movement. They'll walk
Exactly.
through water in their belly. Can't see. It's really, really hard to find beds, like bedding areas and stuff, because they're laying typically in the mud or oak leaves. It's a little bit harder to find that type of stuff. And what I really utilized up there was kind of trying to see edges on a map where if it was oaks to cypress trees, or you had a old stand of timber to a new stand of timber. And I found a lot of success in just deer movement in those areas. I did a lot of ground hunting in West Tennessee, where I would just walk with my bow, especially during the rut, and I would rattle. It's almost like turkey hunting them. Um, my first buck I killed on public with a bow was up there, and
Your
I
dad
rattled
showed
him.
me a picture of that deer. That was a good deer.
Yep.
Yeah, it was last year, wasn't it?
It was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
Um, rattled him up to a spot I'd never been before, and it, like, the farther I got away from where I parked, it just more and more deer sign. I was finding a bunch of big rubs and a bunch of scrapes. And that morning, I'd kind of done similar to the same path. And talk about pressure, I ran into a guy that was I actually walked under him. I didn't see him. He was like 45 foot up in a tree and a climber. And I didn't see him. He whistled at me and he started talking to me, and he was like, "Yeah, I've got like 20 cameras out and all this." And he's like, "I've had some big bucks on camera down by the river." And I was like, I don't know why you told me that, but I was like, "It's like, thanks." But I'd been down there, found all the sign. He told me specifically, he's like, I've got a big 9 on camera that I've been kind of trying to hunt. He's bedding down there, and I went in there that night and I shot a big 9. I don't know if it was the same deer or not, but
Love it.
yeah, I had class in the middle of the day and went to class, and then came back right after class and did the same loop. I remember shooting that deer, and I was like, man, this is about to be a long night. I don't know how we're gonna get this deer out of here. Just because there's a bunch of briars, and I was a mile and a half from any road. I didn't have a bag at that point. I could porter one up and pack it out, and it was cool. There was a bunch of my buddies came out, and for me, that's a super big part of just hunting in general, is having
Absolutely.
good buddies that are gonna come out, and they can make a deer that is less than impressive. They can make it feel awesome as they come out, help you with it, and you get to cut it up after, hang out, and then throw the back straps on the grill. That's a huge part of it for me.
Man, I love that,
Absolutely.
Ben. And look, at the end of the day, man, what you're doing is you're hunting public land, you're bow hunting. Both aren't easy. And so when you have your buddies that celebrate that and are a part of that with you, because a lot of people don't quite, Spook and I've talked about this, of just bow hunting in general is hard. Then when you add in the public land dynamic, those two things together, so you got to celebrate the success and the effort. And so that's very cool that you got buddies that'll come in there and at the drop of a dime and help you do whatever you got to do to get that deer out.
Awesome. I'm extremely fortunate for that. But it's been cool being able to hunt kind of different terrains and stuff, different sizes of public land too. Lived in Ohio for a couple years, or like 10 months. I was up there working for a startup company, ended up not working out. So I came back to Tennessee. But the whole Southeast Ohio thing it's a whole different animal for sure. There's a bunch of pressure. You get a bunch of people from Pennsylvania. Like, every truck you see is out of state tags almost. But the big thing I found there, which coming back, I've applied more to Tennessee and some of the properties I hunt, is benches run along these steep ridges. You can see it on a top of the line, and sometimes you get to one that you thought you saw on a top of a map, and it's not actually a bench that deer can travel. It's grown up. They're not walking through it. But being able to just kind of understand how deer move through those hills and how they move around hub scrapes and all that stuff, which hub scrapes is kind of a buzzword right now within the whitetail world, I feel like. But it's crazy when you find one and there's 6 different trails coming to it, and it's they're all coming from one ridge. Like, that deer is, whatever deer is using that scrape consistently is coming from that spot, and that's where he's bedding. And when you find that, everything kind of clicks a little bit. And sometimes it's not a shooter. I don't really run cameras on public as much because I've had a couple stolen, and
Yeah.
just where it's to me, I'd rather kind of be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something in the whitetail world now where you have less and less of, is that people will have a specific deer that they're hunting on a piece of public. I think some people kind of lose that, like the whole,
Are you married yet, Ben?
like the public aspect of things.
Ben, are you married yet?
I'm not. No, sir.
Okay. The older you get, the more you'll come when you get married, the better you'll like it, that you only want surprises from your wife, and you'll want to learn as much about the deer woods as possible, but you'll take the surprises from your wife.
Oh yeah. I have no doubt. There.
Yeah, no, I'm just messing. I'm just messing with you, but I hear you. There is. I mean, true. I mean, I'm in that world. I run a lot of trail cameras, and I like to know what I'm after. Because then I know what I'm passing up and what I'm not. But there is something to be said about, that. Here comes a deer that you just weren't expecting. Like two of those that I mentioned earlier, I would have shot. Back in those days, just about any buck, any rack buck I would have shot. But those two that I told the story about earlier were quite a bit better than what I was expecting to kill. And so it was definitely a surprise. So it was fun. But yeah, I hear you. That is true. And like you said, it's hard to run trail cameras on a public hunt. Now, if you get a scrape like that one you're talking about, I would say that is a good place to try it. But and I mean, talking about having cameras stolen, I've had 3 good bucks stolen on public hunting before that I shot. So it's that's, and I had one stolen at Oak Ridge. I actually went toe to toe with 2 guys that looked like WWE wrestlers, and I sat there and fussed and stood there, argued with them for an hour. And of course I didn't win, but still, that's one of the hard parts about public hunting is just getting messed up, having to deal with things like that. And I've hunted public hunting for elk. I've hunted public hunting for mule deer. And there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens that you just learn to deal with. But it is gratifying when you are successful. That's for sure.
It is. And you deal with all different types of people. Like, you deal with the guy that he goes and hunts 4 days a year. And then you deal with the dude that's like us, that's passionate about it. And those are the dudes you run into a mile and a half from the truck. And you're like, yeah, we could be friends. Like
yeah. Well, I got a good story there too. So I'm in the mountains in Colorado, just outside of Crested Butte. Mm-hmm. And I'm after a big mule deer. He's probably 205-ish typical. And that morning I look and there's a guy. So I'm slipping into the deer and I look about 90 yards to my right and there's another guy slipping in. And I know he's after the same deer. So we end up bumping into each other 2 or 3 times after this same deer in a 2 or 3 day period. And finally, actually, when I say bumping into each other, we were still a ways apart and somewhat avoiding each other because we knew both, and finally ended up basically walking up to each other one day, and it was Randy Ulmer. And of course, Randy is, one of the, so I was like, what are the odds that me and Randy Ulmer run into each other in Colorado in the mountains chasing the same buck, but, so it was that was quite the conversation. Took about an hour to figure that one out. So anyways, but, those are some of the things that's just going to happen on public hunting, but
So
That's
Ben, like,
part.
what are you like if you're as you go into this year? So you know on the public side, and then we can transition to some of your personal farms that you guys hunt together as a family. But what are some of the things you're going to try to do differently this year that you've learned the last few years to kind of hone in to try to be even more successful?
Yeah, the spot that I first killed the buck on public, like my first public land experience, really, I want to hunt that spot more than I did last year. I only got out there a couple times last year. It's kind of one of those spots, like there's a bunch of different ways to access, and past 2 years I've tried like two different forms of access to get to this one spot specifically. And I was actually turkey hunting in the spring 2 years ago and found a really good path that's going to be not as disruptive to potentially where that buck or where a buck could be bedded. And I'm going to get in there probably mid October. Probably take a few days and go hunt that pretty hard. There's a good
Okay.
white oak tree I found a couple years ago. That's I don't know what makes it special, but it's bare dirt around it, and there's 10 other white oak trees within 100 yards of it that they're not using at all. So and I found that a couple times in West Tennessee as well, in the flat areas where you'll walk past 50 white oaks that are dropping, and you'll find one feed tree necessarily where they're all eating there. And October, I really try to set up in those areas, whether it's on the tree or if it's on a travel corridor, kind of depending on the weather and how intrusive I want to be. Which I typically am pretty aggressive when I
Yeah.
get on a
I
chunk of
love that.
public. Kind of
Yeah.
a booger 'em or kill 'em mentality for me. So that's
I love that. So let me ask you this. So you've been doing this for public land, what, 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, about 4 years now since
All right.
college was when I really started.
So you got a lot of guys that are probably your age and or even older, and they're wanting to get into hunting, and maybe they're going to start with the public land side of things. What would be three things now that you've done this? You're technology savvy. You've killed some deer. You've learned some things. Like, what are three things that you could, if somebody's listening, to say, hey, if you're going to jump into this, like this would speed up the learning curve. If I were to go back and do it again, that would help me be successful a little more quickly.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is, like Spook said, getting out there before the season, like, summer, August, driving around, trying to put eyes maybe on a big buck that's using a field that he's not going to be using come second day of season. And you may even get lucky and scout a deer that's the week before the season that's using that spot up until we hunted last year. There was a deer that was using a bean field every night. We were on him. I think we watched him like 5 nights in a row, and he was using that bean field really, really consistently. And we hunted it opening day that night, and we saw him. He used that bean field, and then I don't think he ever used it. I don't think he ever used it again in the daylight. At least we had cameras up. He was using it at night, but I think that's a good thing to be out there in the summer and just finding those deer. Because even if he quits using the area as you're seeing him, you're going to have a general idea of where they are. Biggest thing is just go. Don't talk about going to scout a spot. Go scout it. Put eyes on it. Get boots on the ground. Biggest thing number two would be, don't worry if you're just getting into it. Don't get so caught up in even shooting a buck necessarily. Like if you go in and shoot a doe, get that scratch that itch a little bit. Yeah, go in and kill a deer. It's a cool thing to do it on public lands. Cool thing to do it on private. I think don't get so caught up in all the, because you watch a lot of these guys that are getting into it. They're watching these dudes on YouTube that are hunting public all over the country, and that's their job. They're doing it every single day. And I think a lot of kids that I've talked to my age kind of get caught up in that and like, oh, well, they're killing, all these big deer. I'm like, yeah, but they're putting in so many hours and stuff, which is awesome. But a lot
Well,
of us,
a lot of that too is coming. A lot of the guys, including myself, is we have over the years. If you just keep doing that, you keep creating all these contacts in this network. So you actually find out about deer in an area. It could be public or private or either one. And so you get some leads that help cut down on your time. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They's like, well, how do you even know where to go? Well, you got to start somewhere, and you start, but you know, you see an old farmer, stop and help him pick up a bale of hay or fix a flat tire or put his mailbox up. And you just keep talking to people at the coffee shop, the restaurant that night, the gas station or whatever. And you will pick up on so much information from these people when you're just in these random places. And people like to talk, especially hunters, and a lot of them will give you too much information.
Yep.
And so you can use that, and that's how a lot of that happens. And you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get so. I mean, I've had times when I just said to heck with it. I'm not even going to hunt today. I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to scout, see what I could find.
Yeah.
And then if I don't find anything, the next time I'm able to go back, I'll just go scout again. I might not even carry. I mean, most of the time I did, but there's been times when I didn't even carry a weapon. I just went walking, just trying to see what I could find. And it almost always paid off. And especially if one of my spots that I really liked was on public hunting. Well, it was kind of cold. There wasn't much sign there. I wasn't seeing much. And so I was like, well, I got to go find something new. By that time, especially at Cheatham and LBL, I had learned enough about it to experiment with some other places. I had looked at the map enough and talked to enough people to get some ideas of some other places to go check out. So I would always find something that I liked that was good enough to hunt. And that's the thing. You just got to go. You just got to go scout. You just got to go hunt. And you're not going to walk in, more than likely. There's always exceptions. You're not just going to walk in on public hunting on the first morning, cold turkey, and think that you're going to climb a tree and kill a deer. It's just going to take some time to learn the layout, and places like Cheatham and LBL that are big, even Fort Campbell. I didn't say much about Fort Campbell because it's so aggravating. It's probably the best public hunting, and it's one of the best public hunting in the United States, but it's so aggravating to get an area assignment. And we had a connection there years ago, that we had a friend in the military there that was there, and he helped us get area assignments, and we would hunt with him. And so it was awesome. And I killed some really good bucks at Fort Campbell. Fort Campbell's huge. They got it's thick. It's great habitat, and But anybody that hears this podcast, they probably gonna say, "Oh, let's go to Fort Campbell and hunt." It is a pain to get your area assignment. You never know where you're going to be. You're talking about hunting cold turkey. You're going to be out there. It's tough. It's very tough.
I've never been up there pretty much for that exact reason. Is like you could get an area and there might not be a deer on the area. Yeah,
well, you just don't know when they've last had a maneuver. I mean, we've gone in on areas and it looked like Iraq. I mean, they had just bombed and had maneuvers, and there's, I mean, it was like, well, this ain't good, But so what we did though, we started talking to guys, started talking to MPs, talked to the head guy there. Take him turkey hunting, take him out to eat, invite him to, cook out. Next thing, I want area so-and-so. Oh yeah, no problem. It's all about connections.
It's a networking, Spook, and you've talked about this.
And you just got to network, and when you establish relationships with people, then it will open doors. I don't care where it's at. I don't care whether it's public, private. I don't care if it's in Africa, Tennessee, Texas, Canada, wherever. it's about networking and relationships. And when I've been doing it for literally for 40 years. And that's how I've been able to get to a point where I have so many opportunities just based off of networking.
Yep.
And
Is that something you're starting to do more of, Ben, and really start to talk more and more to people?
Yeah, like everybody, tells me they deer hunt, especially like Middle Tennessee around, where I think I could get some permission on some stuff. You just talk about what kind of deer you're seeing and just talk, just kind of how we're doing now, and just have conversations with anybody that's willing to converse about deer hunting. And when I was in Ohio, I moved up there, didn't know anybody, and went to the archery range that have like the city, all the city parks up there have really nice archery ranges out to 60, 70 yards. And I met some people there that had some great connections, and got a chance to hunt a couple big deer on, wasn't a big piece of property, but just a little chunk of
All right.
property, kind of suburb hunting. It was like 6 acres, and got a chance to hunt it through those connections, and just talking to people, and becoming friends with anybody who wants to be, and kind of just making connections and stuff. Like I ran into Lee Ellis. This was when he first started the whole Seek One thing, and like after the first year he hunted in Tennessee, I was at Jersey Mike's and getting a sandwich, and I saw him, and I said, "What's up?" And we sat down and had lunch together. And that's one thing that he mentioned and still mentioning. I'll run into him at shows and stuff, and that's how, like you said, just having people, and he's got people all over the country now. They'll be like, "Hey, like I saw this deer, like in this area. Like I don't know if you can go kill him. Like I don't know if I can kill him, but he's up here." And he's kind of had some success doing that. But he sat down with me, and he ate lunch with me. I'd never talked to him before. I'd watched his YouTube stuff, and hats off to him for doing that. But he was doing the same thing, asking me if I'd seen certain deer in the area, and showing me pictures like where this deer is and this road is. I'm like, yeah, like I've seen that deer standing in that bean field, and just kind of cool stuff like that. So I'm definitely trying to do more and more of that. I'm still
Okay.
pretty young, relatively
Well,
speaking, and
the biggest thing is, and you are young, and that's beautiful that you're getting into it this early, and you got a whole career ahead of you, and the things that you have access to now is pretty amazing. So, yeah, I think just keep doing that. I mean, what are some of the technology things before we jump into kind of the management on your own family property? From a technology, what are some of the things that you're using now that you would suggest that people start taking advantage of to speed up the learning curve and have more impact?
just I've learned a lot of stuff from YouTube, and just watching everybody that from I'll look up areas that I'm going to hunt. Like when I was moving to Ohio, I looked up like Southeast Ohio, and there's not as many people that are doing it anymore that they'd say WMA they were hunting, which all that hotspot and stuff's kind of done away with now, because you're just kind of preying on your own downfall. If you're telling somebody where you shot a nice buck, there's going to be a bunch of people in there the next year. But just kind of seeing how other people are doing it, and kind of just taking everybody's opinion, and sorting through what I think is the best method of attack for going into an area, or just hunting in general. And I think the YouTube stuff and all the social media stuff it's really good, really good information. It's kind of like the archery talk blogs and stuff that everybody would post on.
We
I
remember
still,
those, Spook, don't we? The
Oh yeah,
archery talk back in the day. So how are you
yeah.
using the apps and stuff? I mean, do you use a variety of apps, or are you using just the map and the weather? I mean, what are some of the things that you're using as a kind of, I say young hunter, not a new hunter, but just from a
yeah,
technology?
Onyx. I use Onyx a lot. Just if I'm bored, or like I remember I'm sitting in class and stuff in college, that class I wasn't a huge fan of. I'd often find myself just roaming Onyx and just a bunch of different areas, different states, just kind of e-scouting and just dropping pins all over the place. And you may never go check those pins. You might just leave them sitting there. But I've put pins in areas that, man, I think that could be good, especially when I was in Ohio, because that was such a new thing for me. Was I would just spend hours just roaming through public areas using the topo maps, looking at the different map layers on Onyx. Like they have an ag layer, which it can show you what fields are going to be corn, what fields are going to be soybeans. Kind of gives you an idea of they're going to cut this around this time. The deer are going to be, traveling to that field around this time. You're probably going to have better luck October, like early in the year with the soybeans. They have a white oak layer on Onyx that you can. I've got a bunch of layers turns on. It looks like a Christmas tree when you look at my Onyx, and really just kind of learning how to read the topography has been huge too. Especially in Ohio, because it's so steep down there. You can, you might find a spot and be like, oh, let's see how far this is, and you'll drop a line, and you're like, well, it's 400 yards from this road, but it's a mile from this entrance, and it kind of gives you an idea of where you can get away from the most amount of people as well. Is something else that I realize that for. Trail cameras on our private, running cell cams changes the game.
Yeah.
You don't have to go in and disturb an area, but maybe once a summer to change batteries. That's huge for, the first time you go in there is opening day of season, or when you're, cutting a food plot, stuff like that. It kind of takes a little bit of that pressure down. But yeah, the mapping is probably the biggest thing for me. I don't even want to know how many hours I've spent just scrounging Onyx, and whether that's for deer, turkey, ducks, all of it, being able to find a spot on a deer you drive by in a neighborhood and be like, where's the closest spot I could get to, who owns it, and sometimes they don't live there. You find tax addresses and try and hone in on that stuff too.
Okay, I love it. All right, so let's transition to kind of get to this last part of the discussion, is the private land side of it, and you hunting there in Tennessee with your dad and your brothers. What are some of the management things, and if you've got any questions for Spook, relative to things you guys are working on, maybe that he can help you just and some different thoughts, strategies, and all of that.
Yeah, so our property is it's around 900 acres. There's a 200-acre lake on it. So, and it's kind of like donut shape. So it's a little different than stuff I've hunted. I'm still learning, because we've been hunting it. The property we just got, we've been hunting for, I think this will be our 4th season.
Okay.
So Dad bought into this place, and there's some other people that hunt it, but nobody really hunts it like we hunt it. Like we get kind of same thing. You're still dealing with pressure. It's not a whole lot. Most people are just sitting in the closest stand that they, have put up and on the edge of a field. They're not really getting in there and getting deep, but it's got a bunch of little fields. And I guess one of the questions I've got for you is, like, I look at all these little fields and I'm like, this could be a great kill plot, like clover plot. And just kind of can you get to a point on a property where you have too many food sources?
So I just went through this yesterday with the person that I'm consulting with out of Kansas, and it really comes down to how many people there are hunting. If you're trying to provide a quality food plot for one person, then I say you try to keep, and it's got to do with how many acres you got, where it's located. I'm assuming most of this land wooded with just a few scattered openings for food plots. So I like the idea of having if you say you got 900 acres, of course, 200 is water. So you basically got 700 acres of huntable property. I mean, I could say that you could easily have 8 or 10 food plots on that you could, watch especially if you've got other hunters and you don't want to have to be competing over hunting with over 2 or 3 different plots where several people might be trying to hunt the same plot. So a lot of it has to do with how many deer you feel like you're trying to feed, how many people you're trying to accommodate, and want to keep enough feed in there to keep them on the property as much as possible.
Yeah.
And to allow as much hunting opportunity for the other people that have access to the property. Like the guy that I'm working for now, it's just him and his wife. So my idea is, okay, we want to keep enough feed in there to keep the deer attracted to the property rather than going on somebody else as much as possible. But we also don't want to put so much food on there that every time we climb a tree, there's a 90% chance that he's going to be in another spot eating somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's why when I had 975 acre tract in Illinois, when my dad was here, before he passed, we kind of had like dad's side and my side. And so I planted his side up and I planted my side up. Earlier when we had it, I had a lot of different places planted. Well, that's what I was finding.
Deer are spreading
in
out,
stand, and deer would be in one of 2 or 3 other places. So I just quit planting those other spots. I could plant enough food close to where I was hunting and close to where Dad was hunting that I didn't need anywhere else. And so I made it work like that. Then when my dad passed away, I quit planting his side, and then I just had my side planted. And I had corn and beans and brassicas and alfalfa, and I could see it all from my stand. Now, it all wasn't within bow range, but I can figure that part out. Once I watch deer for a few times, then you kind of figure out where they're coming out of the thicket and different things like that. So you can adjust accordingly to where you need to be. But if I've got stuff planted everywhere, then but if I'd had, say, 6 guys hunting that 975 acres, then we would have needed some other places planted to help accommodate everybody and keep everybody kind of from being on top of each other, because we all like hunting food plots because generally we see several deer and it's entertaining and it's gratifying and it can be enjoyable. And it's a great place to hunt in the afternoons. And so, rather than getting back in your bedding areas and your areas, you can hunt food plots without putting so much pressure on the deer and having to get in deep into the property. It's different with public hunting. You want to get in deep because you kind of have to get in deep. But when you're on private property and you're on your own place and you can plant stuff and draw them out to certain places, and then it's a different strategy. And so, but it really comes down to how many people you've got to accommodate. To, if you've got your dad and brothers, and then you may want to have 4 or 5 different options, and then you just run your cameras and you see where the buck you want to chase or where he's showing up the most at. But food plots are easy to eat. Food plots are easy to overhunt too.
Yes.
I mean, you got to be strategic. It's not just an automatic place where you just say, oh, I got a clover plot now, I can go hunt there every afternoon. Don't work like that, especially bow hunting, because bow hunting, you got to get in there tight enough. And then when you're trying to get out without spooking the deer, that's a whole nother dynamic and challenge. Well, if you've got 4 or 5 people on a property doing that every afternoon, that'll cause you that's what causes deer to go nocturnal. So you just got to manage that times when you watch the weather, watch the moon, and pick your strategic times when you can go in and you got a really good chance of seeing the deer that you want to shoot. Now, that's easy to do when you're just dealing with you and your brothers and your dad. If you got other people involved, sometimes, because they're like, well, I only have 1 day a week to hunt or 2 days or this or that. So sometimes it's harder for them to be so selective.
Yeah.
But
Spook, one thing and two, Ben, and on this though is in Spooks talked about this, and I've learned on this too, is don't hunt on those bad wind days too. I mean, if you got multiple spots on that food plot, then that helps. But just because there might be deer showing up, if the wind's bad, then don't hunt it, and just find another spot too. So that's something I've talked with your dad and that you guys are savvy on. But sometimes other hunters may not be considering that, getting in, getting out, and don't hunt on a bad wind just because you want to hunt, because that's the biggest way to blow it too.
Yeah, it's a big thing, and just having different spots to hunt different winds is something like over the years, like I talked about earlier, like we would just kind of hunt the same stand like every time when I was first getting into hunting, and like now, like I may access from the complete opposite side of the property. I may walk an extra half mile even sometimes to get into a spot based on a different wind. But I know you talked about hunting afternoons and mornings, and I know there's some people who I'd never really heard this up until last couple years, and kind of since podcasts and all that stuff started, and just listening to podcasts and people talking, is people not hunting mornings like early in the season, and just kind of like on those bad weather days, which I have always loved hunting the mornings, and I've majority of the bucks I've killed have been in the morning. But I think that's
yeah. So here's the thing. A lot of it's got to do with where you're hunting. I don't like morning hunting food sources except during the rut, but I don't like hunting food sources in the morning unless there's a stand of oaks that I think I can get into back in the woods somewhere without messing up something else. So it's different. It is a little bit different in Tennessee than hunting other places, because in Tennessee, if you can get into an area, and this is what I used to do, I might try to get in there an hour or two before daylight and go real slow. And a lot of times I'd have my trail raked out with a rake and my limbs clipped, and I could ease in there ever so easy and quiet an hour or two. And if I jumped a deer, an hour and a half before daylight or an hour before, it didn't really bother me. Most of the time, they didn't even know what they were running from, because I was being so quiet. I'm clean. I've taken my shower. I got baking soda all over me, but nowadays we have all the commercial scent control things. A lot of times, if it was early season, I'd walk in with nothing but my shorts on, and I'd have my pants and my shirt in my backpack, and walk in and get to the stand and put them on and climb up a tree just to keep from sweating. And I used skunk scent and fox pee and deer urine and different things like that for cover scent. And so I could get away with it in the mornings, hunting back in the timber, hunting oaks, and you'd have deer feed through, and I killed some deer, but just about all my biggest deer that I killed in early or late season have been in the afternoon, and except during the rut. Now, during the rut, it's completely different, so it's all situational. And it also has a lot to do with how confident are you can get into that stand of oaks or whatever it is they're feeding on in the mornings without messing it up. And and then the other thing is your food source in one part of your clover or alfalfa or cornfield or bean field or brassicas or whatever it is in one area. If you've got another area of the farm, a fairly good sized farm, that you can go over there and hunt in the mornings because you just want to hunt, and maybe they, if there's acorns in that area and you want to try to hunt it, that's fine. I've just personally had better success, but I have that's what I do mostly because that's what I like. I like to plant the food plots and hunt those food plots and food sources in the afternoon. in the early season. And then in the rut, I tend to more gravitate into those spots that are deeper, and I feel like I can get in and out of them in the mornings easier without, it being so obtrusive. And so, because I personally feel like most places now, not everywhere, there's always exceptions to the rule, but most places are just really difficult because there's always something hindering you, a property line or acts, keeping you. You really can't come in like you want to get in there in the mornings without messing it up. And so, so many times I just find it's better. You'll do less damage if you just don't hunt in the mornings. And just about everybody I know that, from everybody, the juries, the Lee, everybody is pretty much in early and late season is just hunting afternoons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that too, Ben. Like, look, I hunted Georgia a lot in the early season for years. And here recently, Florida, the same thing. The challenge I had was you had so much cover that I blew more deer out going in the morning than it was worth than just being able to slip in the afternoon. So for me, it was more just I was just killing the area, and no matter how quiet I tried to be and all of that, it just rarely worked out. So that's a bigger part for me that I in the Southeast that I always dealt with.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And like I've done what Spook said, like I'll get in, hour and 30 minutes before the sun comes up, and you spook a deer that early in the morning.
Exactly. It's not terrible.
Not the worst thing ever. You still hate to do it. I mean, every time a deer blows in the woods, I'm like, you just hate to hear it. But yeah, it's definitely I think it's interesting how much it changes from like early October. We opened, last week of September in Tennessee. From that week in September to that first cold front in October. Like I have, at least on places I've hunted in the past, whether it's public, private, that first cold front in October, like I have to be in the woods at the spot where I've had big bucks on camera. And I feel like I always at least see them, or whether that's October 15th, October 25th. But I feel like those first 2 days in October where it's going to be 30 degrees in the morning, I think those are two of the best days of the year for all day movement as well. I get a lot of those. Are 2 days I'll always try and sit from daylight to dark on those 2 days.
Love it. All right, give us you got another question, and we'll wrap this baby up.
No, this isn't like management related as well, but I'm I love shooting my bow, and I think it's always interesting talking to people about what bows they shoot, arrow setups, fixed blade, mechanical, stuff like that. Because I know you guys are also, big archery hunters, and I think it's different. Everybody's different takes on that stuff as well. Yeah. So I'm curious what y'all shoot.
Well, I've shot a lot of different companies' bows, and I've loved every one of them. Most all these bows will shoot any company. All these guys have really good bows and shoot better. The bow will shoot better than the archer can most of the time. I'm currently shooting a Darton bow, which Darton is an old company that has a lot of old patents and kind of was forgotten about. And a friend of mine, Randy Kitts, who owns Black Eagle Arrows, actually bought Darton and has revamped the company. And so I'm excited. I love the bow. It's super smooth. It's easy to shoot. I know I've shot Matthews. I used to be sponsored by Matthews, loved it. I've killed some big bucks. The big buck I killed in Kansas in 2007 was a Matthews. I've killed, I shot for PSC. I really like Pete Shepley. I killed a mule deer. I'm sitting here looking at it 103 yards in Utah with a PSC. Was epic. I've shot Hoyt. I'm sitting here looking at a polar bear that I shot with a Hoyt. And so I shot Bowtech. I've killed, 7 or 8 200s with a Bowtech. So
Yep.
I like all the bows. I do. So broadheads, I shoot Swacker. I shot
Yep.
Thunderhead for years and years and years and was a diehard Thunderhead guy.
Yep.
I'm friends with Hank Parker, as you know, and Hank was a Swacker guy. He was part of
Yep.
the bringing that company into the hunting industry. And he convinced me after a few years that I could depend on it. And so knock on wood, I've had tremendous success with Swacker. Brian has
Same here.
too. Levi shoots Swacker.
Yeah.
Josh used to shoot Swacker until he came out with his own broadhead, which a lot of these broadheads in today's world are based off the same design and technology.
Yeah.
So that's just what I shoot. There's a good chance that I'll probably at some point start shooting the Beast some because I'm friends with Josh, you know. But I've had great luck out of those. There's some others that I won't mention that I've seen some not so good things come from. Yeah, if you shoot them, I can shoot one through the lungs and a 12 ring him with a field point, you're going to kill him. But the thing is that bow hunting, and as much as we'd like to think we're really, really good, and we should be as prepared as possible before we even try it, there's always something that can happen or go wrong, and you just got all the different angles, and you're in the woods. There's so many things. You're hunting a wild animal. He can move 2 or 3 inches any direction on the release and change everything. So you want the best performance. Yeah, you want the best performance out of your equipment as you can get. I shoot Black Eagle arrows. I think there's a lot of good arrow companies. I like Randy. I think he's a very knowledgeable person. He knows the designs. I'm like, Randy, can you build me 100-pound bow and set me up a setup that I can shoot an elephant with? He's like, absolutely, no problem. Can do it in a week, you know?
Yeah.
And so, all these guys that I'm talking about, the guys at Matthews, the guys at Hoyt, Pete Shepley, Randy, all these companies are, they make great bows. It's just a matter of finding so we're all different sizes. We all have different draw lengths. We all have different things that we think are smooth and feel good to us. And when we hit that pocket, what we like. And so, but I personally, I shot marten for a while. I knew I was leaving. I've killed a couple big ones with a marten. Loved their bow when I shot it. I will say I'm probably right now I'm super happy and comfortable with this dart. And I was really, I wasn't nervous or scared about it when Randy called me and asked me to shoot a dart. And I wasn't, because I trusted him, but I was somewhat didn't know what to expect, because and I was like, shoot, this thing's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about it.
They've come a long ways. And so, I mean,
at the ATA show 2 years ago, and I liked it. It shot good. I don't know when he got the company. I'm sure it's probably
he's had it about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. It was a new boat. Shot good. I liked it. I shot it a few times.
Same thing. I've shot Matthews PSE. I'm shooting a Hoyt right now, only just because a good buddy of mine in Georgia who builds bows and has a shop, try to support him. And I love it. I will say the broadhead thing is really important, and it's based on what you're comfortable with and confident, because as Spook said, we all make mistakes. Animal can shift, animal can move, and I've made some less than perfect shots. And the Swacker has yet to fail me. I mean, just from bears, turkeys, deer, I mean, it just does its job. Do I love the band part of it? And that sometimes that's a pain, but most of the time it's not an issue. So anything that's like a Swacker, big cut, reliable, I'm a fan of. I have started shooting, and I've shot Black Eagle. They're great arrows. I have started shooting these UV arrows, and they're a semi-custom built arrow, and I've been really impressed with them. And they have a sight too. So I like a sight that is a vertical, and it's an adjustable too. So that's something, it's a single pin, but they kind of all stack on top of each other. So for my eyes, that works. But the point is, you find what works for you and what you're comfortable and you're confident with. And you can then, in that nervous moment, just that muscle memory where you can get it done. And so the technology today is amazing, and I don't think you can go wrong with anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think
I
the
agree.
biggest part of it is just shooting your bow. Like
Yep.
it was, I was
Very
talking about
much
the
so.
archery range that I shot at in Ohio. Like I was there, moved up in June, and I shot 4 or 5 nights a week, and it was crazy. Like 4 days before the season, there was 35 people there that I hadn't seen, and
Of
I was
course.
like, y'all are a little late to the party. Like I think just shooting your bow consistently is huge for if you're if you're really bow
For
hunting a
sure.
lot. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I would say, look, the bows and arrows are equalizers. It is the broadhead, I think, is the one thing that is the little bit of a differentiator, and that all the broadheads are not created equal. And I think you got to find, I think there, as Spook said, Josh's broadhead has gotten good feedback. We love the Swacker. There are others that are similar type. I think you got to shoot them and test them and research them on YouTube and all of that. But I do think that's the one thing, is you do need to probably put a little more effort into researching that and the confidence. Then you're going to find a bow company and an arrow that's going to shoot great, release, so just for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
So like I started shooting the Severs last year, and it's kind of similar to Josh's, where it swivels on impact. And I was super impressed with them. I shot a deer that was quartering towards me pretty hard last year. Like basically, it was shooting down on him front shoulder, and I got I had like this much of my arrow sticking out, 8-10 inches. And it almost exited the back hip. So I was super impressed with the penetration on those. And
Nice.
That's
it's
actually,
crazy.
so it's funny you bring that up. That's actually what got me. Hank convinced me to go to Swacker. So Hank shot about 150 or 60-inch buck with us in Kentucky many years ago, and he shot the deer quartering to him at 37 yards. Now, there's not many people that'll take that shot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of difference in a quartering to you shot at 15 to 25 yards than at over 30. 37 yards on a quartering to you is pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And he hit the deer right where his neck meets his shoulder, and that deer passed through his hip at 37 yards. And
That's
I was
awesome.
like, I'm in.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's what made me
100%. I had a similar deer in Alberta, 54 yards, kind of just not a perfect shot, but passed through and a little high, but the angle, and when he turned and ran away, he was bleeding out and just fell on camera. And so it was super impressive. Spook, you remember the story that Hank said that? So Ben, Hank was at a show, and he had a couple of guys come up to him and say, "Hey man, we really like that Swacker broadhead. We want to start using it." And he said, "Man, that's great. I really appreciate that." And he goes, "Well, what was the reason why you started to want to use it?" He goes, "We haven't seen you make one good shot on a deer, and every one of them have died." And so,
I love it.
so
That's good
that
stuff.
was good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Ben,
Yeah.
man, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you got a few pearls, and I just commend you for just the desire and the drive to do what you're doing, and the love and passion that you have for this. And love to have you back on, man. And just, again, appreciate you and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been good. Learned a lot, had some great conversations. So I appreciate it.
As always, thank you everybody for listening and tuning in, and God bless, and we'll talk soon.